Hello and welcome to Farm Journal Live. I'm editor Clint Griffiths coming to you from our newsroom here in northern Indiana as we bring you the latest on the coronavirus pandemic and its impacts to the agricultural industry. Let's get straight to some of the headlines today. Beginning today, all 50 states are at least partially reopened or in the process of reopening. This as the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have released new guidelines. States like Georgia, they took an early, more aggressive approach to getting things reopened. Some states like Connecticut, the last state to start easing, are taking things a bit more slowly. But all governors encouraging residents and businesses to take precautions as they attempt to restart the economy. The newly released CDC guidelines should help places like schools, daycares, restaurants, and public transportation. For example, under those guidelines, CDC suggesting that schools that are currently closed remain closed, and when they do reopen, to maintain social distancing and reduce interaction between students. The USDA
Let's go to the non-specialty crop section. This is where the corn production is entered. On her 500 acres, Jane produced almost 100,000 bushels of corn in 2019. She had 40,000 bushels unsold as of January 15th. The spreadsheet calculates her estimated payment at $13,400. Next, her beef cattle. Jane sold 50 head of mature cattle between January and April and has 100 head on hand between April and May. So here's her estimated payment for beef cattle.
That combined payment coming in at nearly $8,000. You can find this video and lots of other information at farmers.gov/CFAP. What you're looking at there is heavy rain taking a toll on infrastructure. Michigan's governor declaring a state of emergency for a county where two dams failed. Edenville and Sanford dams breached Tuesday night after heavy rains and flash flooding. Residents in parts of Midland County now being urged to evacuate immediately. Officials in the city of Midland say they're expecting historic flooding. Residents should head for higher ground. It's estimated that downtown Midland could be under 9 feet of water. The chairman of the Midland County Board of Commissioners saying he believes about 3,500 homes, 10,000 people have now been affected so far. No deaths or injuries have been reported thus far. Brian Doherty with Total Farm Marketing joining us now. And Brian, we've seen quite a bit of flooding. You know, a week or so ago, we saw some freeze damage. Let's talk about these markets today and whether or not it's too early or too late to start writing off any kind of weather market for this year.
Yeah, great question. That's certainly on the mind of a lot of people, in particular in the wet areas, because we saw last year where at this same window, the rain started and didn't let up. But with over 80% of the crop planted and it only being May 20th, that quite can't hit my radar yet as urgent or critical, at least not as a whole. So when we look at the nation's corn crop, at 80% planted, you're going to see some areas, and the USDA does have some revisions built into their estimates that there will be some abandoned acres every year. So at this point, I would say not, and the market's not focusing on it. Maybe a bigger, longer-term story might be just the cold weather and how that created an environment where a lot of the early planted corn really didn't get the advantage of being early planted. So you're going to get a lot of the crop bunched up at one window.
You know, Brian, we were talking a little bit about some of the states starting to reopen. We're seeing more people out and about, starting to do a little more driving. We do have some fresh ethanol numbers. Your impression of those today, what do they tell us?
Yeah, what they tell us is that things are slowly edging back in the right direction for at least ethanol usage and corn production. The ethanol production, 67.1 million bushels of corn used this week. That's about 5 million bushels more than the previous week. When we look at the ethanol stocks, they fell for the 4th week in a row, and that's all good news. Now, we're not anywhere where we were last year. Let me give you an example. The grind for corn, I said, was 67.1 million bushels. That's still about 40 million bushels less than we were a year ago at this time. But nonetheless, headed in the right direction. The corn market is stabilizing. You've got the energy market stabilizing. Crude oil near $33 a barrel. It was just a month ago when energy prices took that historic negative dive. So we're not in that same environment right now. And as you said, things are opening up. People are beginning to drive more. They're getting out. They're pent up. So we think there's good demand that's surfacing, but we're not at last year's levels.
You know, Wall Street Journal rolling out an article over the evening talking about some of the buying ramping up from China and some of that global demand starting to come in. What do you see for these markets once we get past this kind of Memorial Day, lull that we always have at the end of May as we start into the true heart of this growing season and trying to build out expectations for the rest of this year?
Yeah, there's true camps that have sort of developed. One is, look, it doesn't really matter how you slice it. We're going to have just too much inventory of corn. Beans potentially have the more friendly story. When you look at projected carrot at 400 million, you drop a bushel or two off of yield, and all of a sudden this carryout number gets way tight. So a lot does depend on how the export market goes and how it moves. Beans are considered competitive. U.S. beans with Brazilian beans are very close to it right now. Plus, they've got a COVID problem in Brazil. We're wondering how the shipping might work in that part of the world. But China, the big story there is whether they're going to step up and really make some bigger purchases sooner than later. And one analysis that goes back to what they said when they made the agreement. They'll buy at the right time and at the right price. I don't think they can argue the price. They're getting basement bargain for reasons they didn't see, I think. At least I don't think they saw back in January. And so we wouldn't be surprised if they come in and really start buying for state-owned reserves and just buying because of value. The key is you've still got to produce crops this year. 2/3 of the world's corn crop is produced in the northern hemisphere. So as weather goes, so might the price of corn. So it looks bearish now, but if we have drought in Europe or we have a problem here, and some forecasters are calling for warm and dry this summer, corn's a cheap commodity.
Yeah, as you mentioned drought in Europe, that's starting to play a little bit with our wheat markets here today, hearing about some drier weather. We're seeing some double-digit gains today for wheat.
Yeah, you are, and here at home too. If you're a wheat farmer in western Kansas or in Colorado or parts of Nebraska, it's been either dry or pesky dry, and so conditions aren't great. There were some freeze issues there, so it's nice to see the market rebound today. Yet, the USDA did tell us this month that the world has ample supply of wheat, so it might be hard to get that traction and really get this moving, but attention will focus on, you start crossing this mid-May threshold, and the market really is going to focus on dry conditions or hot conditions or both for wheat in the northern hemisphere. And I think that's what's in the market today. You've got a forecast that really doesn't hold well for good moisture in Europe.
Yeah. Real quick before we let you go, talk a little bit about the livestock side of things. You're there in Wisconsin, some pretty big dairy country up there. How are folks feeling right now? We have seen a little bit of a bump in milk prices here over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
What's the thought?
Well, it's emotional all the way around, because if you as a dairy producer, if you went out and bought some DRP insurance and then the market dropped, you kind of had that in your back pocket. So you really weren't overly concerned. It's just maybe you didn't have enough. Now the market rallies back and some farmers have that sense of, oh, shucks, I should have protected that. It's volatile. My advice would be to have good conversations with your advisor on just how to manage this. But we've got such a good rebound in the market here and good cheese prices that I don't think farmers want to let this slip. I would look at protecting with put options. This is a crazy volatile window, but it looks like a consumer is really chasing the cheese market.
You know, we talked about the price of corn and the price of grain, but on the other side, we've got livestock producers here that maybe this is an opportunity for them if they have the chance to go and lock in that opportunity.
Yeah, there's different opportunities out there. We got to be really careful that we don't get too excited about everything recovering. What we're seeing is probably 120 cash bids in cattle today. That's very encouraging, and that reflection of good demand and probably cutout value starting to drop so it doesn't stifle demand in the consumer sector. Look at put options, though. I think that's your best tool in these volatile environments. I know they cost a little bit more, but unlike forward contracting or hedging, where you've got a price locked, and then you either could get margin call or your account's good, or you've just got a price locked. Here you keep that top side open. So really look at the tools and have good conversations on how to manage that risk and take advantage of the opportunities.
All about managing risk. Thanks so much, Brian Doherty with Total Farm Marketing. Appreciate you joining us today. And thanks all of you for joining us for today's Farm Journal Live. I'm Clinton Griffiths We hope you have a great afternoon and a safe one all across farm country. Thanks for watching. It started as social distancing, self-isolation, and caring for loved ones. A time for agriculture to be proud, to be essential. Now, it's changing. While states start to reopen and jobs resume, out here, the clouds are building. The path is uncertain. It's not the first time, it won't be the last. But we'll farm on. This soil is soaked in generations of sweat, of reinvention, of grit. Farm on is a calling. It's a mantra, a mindset. When the horizon dims and things turn dark, we'll find the light. We may be doing this for you, but we're also doing it for them. 2020, now's the time to farm on.